welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast for August 21st, 2026. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about. It's episode 257, and I've got back with me. Dexter White is in the house. We're going to talk a variety of things U.S.-centric today, because we had primaries in Florida on Tuesday, and they were very interesting. So, Dex, how are you? What's going on? How you been?
Hey Tom, how's it going? Good to see you.
It's it's going. Like there's lots of stuff going on, and it's funny. One of the things that I've been thinking about all week is that it's been kind of boring in some ways, but it really hasn't been, because there's a lot of little things that have happened. But the overarching, like, there's nobody, nobody's lighting their hair on fire about anything right now. But I think it's important that we dig into some of the nuances of what we saw in the primary elections in Florida on Tuesday. And since you're my best source of Florida politics, I think we should, chat about Florida politics.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's both a bellwether in some ways, but also it's important, I think, to treat Florida as Florida and others, not get ahead of ourselves, with national analysis. Because a lot of the stuff I've heard regarding like the national take on Florida is just, this is pretty off-base stuff, because they don't, like a lot of people running for office in Florida, they don't actually know Florida very well. So,
Right.
um, yeah, so we had a governor. Top of the slate was pretty uninteresting, other than governor and U.S. Senate seat primaries. So Byron Donalds, who's Trump's pick, got 47% of the primary vote, which honestly is not as good as everyone told us he would get, considering that he wouldn't do debates because he, quote, didn't have any other challengers who had more than single digits. And remarkably, even the meme candidate, James Fishback, came in with 10.5% of the vote, which was a great performance by him, which I'll get to later. But
Mhm.
Lieutenant Governor came in with 25%. Now, obviously, Byron Donalds won with 47, but the not doing debates has made so many people in Florida very angry, because the Florida GOP, which is highly defective in many ways,
Mhm.
has really turned the corner into trying to be like the take it or leave it party. We're just going to do all the deal making and let the crumbs fall on the floor. And there's definitely a Susie Wiles angle here.
Mhm.
They're trying to turn the Florida into like Trump decree land. And, hardcore DeSantis people who, there's a ton of crossover, if not almost unity, with supporting Trump. They don't like the way DeSantis has been treated by Trump and Susie Wiles. And they don't like the way the Florida GOP has become a rubber stamp for Trump. Especially since, at this point, why does he care about state level politics?
Fair.
It's really like, dude, just stay out of our business. But there is some deal with DeSantis. Something is still brewing, and as long as Susie Wiles is chief of staff, like DeSantis won't be part of the Trump administration. So Trump's going to have
Mhm.
to get rid of Susie Wiles if he wants to bring in like the real talent, of Ron DeSantis. It is what it is. Susie Wiles is just a petty, ridiculous person, and she has blocked. I mean, Trump has done a rapprochement with that sleazebag Cohen, his lawyer.
Mhm.
Was on his podcast the other day. It's like, if he can get over it with him, like the idea that he can't get over with DeSantis is ridiculous. And DeSantis and Trump had meetings at Mar-a-Lago without
Mhm.
Susie Wiles's approval, um, because everything has to go through her. And I think there'll be some sort of disjunction in the future on that one. But back to the race, there was like I dug pretty far in on the crosstabs on this one, and it's interesting. Jay Collins, the lieutenant governor, who was appointed midterm when Nunez, who was the elected lieutenant governor, stepped down to take over at FIU. She's now president at FIU, so she was had better things to do with the last 2 years of her term. Fair enough, since
Mhm.
the Florida lieutenant governor position is essentially like hanging out in an office and watching the paint peel in Tallahassee. I mean, I'm not sure that they
Right.
do anything.
Right.
Um, So anyway, but Jay Collins is a kind of a military vet guy that was picked by DeSantis, who notably did not come out and campaign for him, nor did he campaign for Paul Renner, who's a former head of the, he's a former Florida speaker, um, and a decent one. And no one else on the ticket. I mean, obviously DeSantis wouldn't have come out for Fishback,
Right.
but everyone else on the ticket are like one percenters or less, so they're not even worth talking about. Although Bobby Williams got 4%, but fine. Sadly, Paul Renner was only able to get 8.6% in the election, which is exactly what Ron DeSantis said. Is like when he told Renner, he's like, "Look, you're a great candidate, but you have zero name recognition in the state. Unless you have a plan to address that, you shouldn't even run." And that's what DeSantis told him. And
Hmm.
I think that James Fishback, who probably half the population hasn't even heard of yet, still got 10.5%,
Hmm.
over Renner's 8.6. And Renner was Speaker of the House. So,
Right.
and Collins being lieutenant governor, only being able to get 25%, I'm not saying I'm in no way endorsing Donald's, but Donald's won. So, but Donald's refusing to debate and the Florida GOP backing up his refusal to debate is going to really hurt them in the long run and could hurt them in this election because I don't really think Donald's has it in the bag to the degree that they're going to tell everybody. And that the reason for that is pretty simple. Um, Donald's and his minions are have kind of rapidly switched to the rub their noses in it phase of this for all the people. Like they started running before the day before the primary was held. They started running this. We all have to come together around the winner stuff, and it's a very stupid policy because what Byron may not understand is that the only electorate he has to court to avoid a disaster and ensure winning is the NPAs, the right wing NPAs and right wing DeSantis people. Those are the people who can make or break his election.
Yep.
Florida is, not blue and not purple. The demographic shift is real, but it's not as Republican, meaning registered Republican, as the last two elections would make you think. Um, and why they have a hard time grasping this is beyond me. Like NPAs who are right wing, not no party affiliation, who are right wing are the majority of the NPAs, but NPAs are the majority in Florida.
Right.
We're the ones who carried him over the line against Gillum, and we absolutely carried him over the line in reelection, meaning DeSantis. So the people who have come and switched the Florida, registration is now solidly Republican. But take a good look at how big the NPA registration is. And just
Hmm.
because the Republicans have trounced the Democrats at at the state level registration, like, don't forget how these work. Voting is either a +1, I vote for Byron, it's a 0, I leave it blank or I put in a ridiculous write-in candidate, or a -1, which is I vote for Jolly as a protest. And there are a lot of NPAs who were absolutely ride or die DeSantis who are already like, screw this, we have to teach the Florida GOP a lesson,
Mm.
and we are voting for Jolly. And so every one of those votes is a -2 off the Donalds, effectively speaking,
Right.
because they would have voted for him and now they're voting against him. So it's a 2-point spread, a 2-vote spread.
Right.
Um, and if he doesn't start, and the other problem is personality. Like Byron Donalds is an arrogant asshole. Um, you know, it is what it is. It's not even an insult coming from me, but he's also not very smart and he has a kind of the bully's personality. And so I put his real odds of winning at about 60%. I think he'll win. I think he has most of what it takes to win just from the raw numbers.
Hmm.
But he doesn't understand and has never sought to understand the sort of old Florida network. Um, I do think that there's some number of panhandle, like North Florida counties that there's still probably some racial bias that they won't vote for a black governor.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it's super widespread, but if you're running an election and you're like, well, I think we have 3 points of softness here, you better put it on your list because you need to make
Hmm.
up that 3 points somewhere else.
Yep.
And I'm not entirely convinced that where um, Collins did best is because they liked Collins,
No.
because it lays over those exact counties that I would say might have a kind of a racial, tinge. And because Collins is a dipshit too. Like
Right.
Collins is basically, he's a bald guy with a beard that looks like he doesn't understand how mirrors work. He's like one of these guys who can't just go to the barber and be like, "Hey, could you shape my beard to my face? Like I'm running for governor." It's like,
Right.
no, I'm going to keep, exaggerating, shaving my beard on one side different than the other because I'm right-handed or whatever. It's like, dude, did nobody even step you aside and be like, dude, this is a very aggressive look like for Florida governor. I mean, we had a bald governor, Scott,
Right.
he won 2 terms, maybe just shave the beard off. Like,
Right.
we get it, you're ex-military, but he went so far into this almost Bilzerian-esque, like physical. And I was just like, did nobody take him aside and be like, dude, you look like a jackass? But whatever. I mean, this matters in politics, whether people like to think it or not.
It does. It does. And
It's
it's
like
fun. It's funny that he did really well in the counties you're talking about is where I am in Florida. And
overall counties, right? Like,
the whole the north and west of and north and just west of Gainesville up to the Georgia border. What some of my patrons said to me in the past, you don't live in North Florida, you live in South Georgia, dude. Come on.
yeah,
Um,
but West Palm and Ponte Vedra somehow didn't come out for him when he
yeah, no,
when
no,
he
no.
now
Columbia,
now
Swanee, yada yada yada.
separately, the other interesting crosstab is when you look, and I'll get into the Senate here in a second, but the most interesting crosstabs were Donald's strength, which are, Naples, where he's from, fair enough. You should
Right,
do real well where you're from. And then Broward and Dade, because it's all Trump said, therefore I do county.
right.
And where the worst part of the Florida GOP is centered, which is Dade.
Hmm.
So yeah, so Donalds did really well, below Lake Okeechobee, let's say. But more interestingly for me was how well Vindman did in places like Palm Beach, and Vindman got his ass kicked by Angie Nixon. We'll get to that.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Vindman, like you can look at the map and realize the newest Floridians where they live voted for Donalds, and the newest Republicans who moved, and the newest Democrats voted for Vindman.
Hmm.
You know, and
Hmm.
so I mean to kind of wrap up on Byron the Brown Noser, there is the Susie Wiles angle here. It's this weird Naples Jacksonville nexus in Florida politics. Naples is a suburb of Jacksonville when it comes to the Republican Party, so she's been behind him the whole time, and she did it to just part of her eternal hatred for DeSantis for firing her because she's incompetent. And DeSantis didn't endorse anyone in the primaries. He may offer a tepid endorsement of Donald's. I think it's notable that Ron DeSantis came out and talked extensively how great it would be for the Surgeon General to carry over into the Donald's administration. I heard that like him setting conditions for an endorsement.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So for
it
those,
was kind of weird the way the whole speech went. I was like, oh, so Ron is basically saying, I know you're going to try to undo all my stuff, but I'm going to start making you pay a price for me. Because Ron DeSantis understands that Donalds can actually lose this election. I'm
yeah.
not sure Donalds does.
Well, just to make sure that everybody who's listening to this podcast understands Florida geography, Naples and Jacksonville are over 300 miles away from each other. One is Southwest Florida, and the other is practically Georgia. Just
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean, there's been different axes in Florida
right.
Republican politics over the years. I mean, every era is a little different. The DeSantis era is certainly different than the Scott era, and going back to ancient history and Bush was different because Bush was a carpetbagger, and obviously
Mm,
Bush had came in with but Bush was Dade County and centric as a
hmm.
person, like that's where he lives with his wife.
Right.
And he built a lot of that, terrible Florida GOP apparatus, that did a lot to sabotage DeSantis in his second term. Frankly, for all the amazing things that DeSantis has gotten done, he's had to fight this Florida legislature like there were Democrats, and this is something that I will never forgive Susie Wiles for sabotaging this state as much as she has, just out of pure spite. And she deserved to be fired because she's an idiot. And I hope Trump fires her because he risked. I mean, this is a woman who got her hair styled to look like Donald Trump's mom just to kiss his ass, and then she's in there. I wouldn't be surprised if she was the source of most of these leaks. I mean, she should have been fired for that Atlantic magazine interview disaster alone.
Hmm.
So anyway, let's get to the Senate.
Sure.
Angie Nixon soundly curb stomped Vindman.
Hmm.
Um, it's always hard with the Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Like which one was he even?
I think it's Alex, wasn't it?
Right, it's Alexander, right? Because there's
Right.
two of them.
Yeah, there's Eugene and Alexander.
Yeah, right. Okay, so it's Alexander Vindman. So Vindman came in and told, like literally on a actual interview, someone asked him about the primary, and he's like, "What? Oh, there's a primary?" He said that in public. Like, I have been anointed. I am the great Vindman. I've been airdropped into Florida to teach you rednecks how to do things. And Angie Nixon is a legit native Floridian from Jacksonville. Uh, she's a two-term Florida House rep. She's worked many years in Duval County, where Jacksonville is, and Jacksonville is a city and a county, for those who don't know.
Hmm.
She got 700. She beat him by 150,000 votes,
That's a lot.
56-44, basically. Um, and she did it with, I mean, one, she just dominated Duval County, which makes
Hmm.
perfect sense. She is literally lives and breathes the black community in Jax. That's her place. Like she also dominated in Florida 24, which is more like Miami, but that's where Frederica Wilson's district is. Huge black community down there. Really important kind of bellwether in Florida politics. Not really a bellwether, actually. You always know how they're going to vote, but bellwether on turnout.
Right.
And then sort of the South Orlando. I mean, those three places she drove just like three sigmas over Vindman and just curb stomped him. And I was it just cracked me up. I was like, "Go Gators!" because she's a UF grad too. Um, now, now, I mean, a good person to have a cocktail with at the Florida Georgia game. Um, Now, you're going to hear the national story that the DSA candidate Angie Nixon, beat Vindman. Well, that's yeah, technically true, but the important thing I think people need to realize is that Angie Nixon declared DSA after she had started her campaign, and in fact, like she did it just to more or less troll. And I'm not saying she's not, you know,
Hmm.
she's a lefty. I mean, no
Right.
doubt. But she just kind of joined like I mean maybe 4 weeks ago. So it was just even the Broward County based DSA guy on Twitter was like, dude, I can't take credit for Angie Nixon. He goes, I wish. Because their candidate lost in the new Florida 25 to the incumbent Moskowitz. So, the DSA isn't like really running the table down here. And I think the Angie Nixon story is an Angie Nixon story. Like she's just good at what she does.
Hmm.
The Republicans would be lucky to have someone with the kind of raw political just instincts and she has just innate like she's going to be someone to watch. She is going to absolutely be a part of Florida politics. She'll probably take another swing. Now, I do not think she can win as senator just due to certain realities. The
Hmm.
state level registration advantage, again, talk about that, racial bias in North Florida, which will also be an issue for Donalds. The embracing of the DSA is not going to play well in Dade County at all.
Hmm.
And the DSA's recent 100th birthday card to Fidel Castro is probably going to lose her an extra 3 points in Miami-Dade among Democrats.
Oh,
So,
right.
and then Moody has the incumbency, and whatever happens, I don't see many people who want to teach the Florida GOP a lesson not voting for Moody. So even though I think there will be a lot of split ballots, and Donalds may lose if he does a few things wrong from here, Um, that I think I mean, I think it's pretty safe bet Moody's winning and the whole top of the ticket are going to be Republican, meaning the CFO, the Commissioner of Agriculture, and the Attorney General. Those are our three elected, and the Lieutenant Governor to be determined because Donald hasn't declared who he's picking. But um, pretty safe bet that's going to be Meg Weinberger, um, who's actually Christian for the fishback voters, just so you don't get yourself off on a rant. But she is another, appointed by Trump candidate. She's the one who got Palm Beach International Airport's IATA code changed to DJT, which has caused literal suicidal.
Tendencies.
So Palm Beach International Airport is now Donald Trump International Airport. And when you book it, like just like you're booking a flight to like Atlanta and the code is ATL, if you're booking a flight to Palm Beach, it's no longer PBI, it's now DJT. And this has caused quite a kerfuffle on the island, but which I think that's high comedy, but I'm a
It
terrible
is.
person. So
You're really not. I
um
think it
but
is.
but my point is that Meg Weinberger, who's also I think my favorite like Florida fact about her is she's a graduate of Peanut Butter and Jelly College, which was what they used to call Palm Beach State College. It was back when we renamed all our junior colleges in Florida, but Palm Beach Junior College is widely understood by people in South Florida to be Peanut Butter and Jelly College. So, but to her credit, she's on the I think she's on the board of directors or trustees for Stetson, so that's good Florida cred in my book. Um, but yeah, my money's on Meg Weinberger being Donald's running mate. Jolly, the Democrat candidate for governor, has picked Gwen Graham, who is the daughter of the former governor of Florida, Bob Graham, former senator. Um, Smart pick. Lieutenant governor is still meaningless, but it's nice. It and the other thing about Jolly is he's been a Democrat for like 3 years. He's like a Charlie Crist Tampa Republican who, will change his party affiliation every day of the week. And notably, Jolly has been a Democrat for less time. Like Byron has been a Republican for about as long as Jolly's been a Democrat. Actually, he's probably been longer, but um, it's just another thing Byron Donalds is going to need to manage because trying to cast Jolly as the trans your kids world is ending candidate, it's for informed people it's going to be an eye roll, and also for informed people as Floridian voters, like they know how hard it is to get stuff done as the governor when you have the legislature, and
Right.
Jolly is going to be facing a super majority. And last time you and I on a podcast, I said, look, it's very real that people will look at Jolly and be like, whatever, he's not going to get anything done. I'm going to vote for him to teach them a lesson. That is now all over X as like the strategy for these disgruntled NPAs. So
Yep.
real factor.
Yeah. No. This is one of those. This is one of those stories. Was part of the reason why when you and I sat down to tape out what we were going to talk about this morning. One of the things I wanted to I wanted you to go into all that because it reminds everybody that all politics is local, and that everything is far more nuanced than the soundbite style politics that we generally engage in, especially in this hyperbolic scenario that we have right now, where everybody's like crashing out on X for whatever headline is being pushed by the algorithm into their face. And so, you know, going through these things, this is the kind of analysis that's actually being done for real internally. And it's interesting, like this week, this was not something we were originally going to talk about, but it just popped into my head. I think it's important. We had one of these, I don't remember the name of the thing. I tweeted about it the other day. One of these polling outfits, and I'm using my air quotes and my scare quotes when I say that, come out and say, "Oh, by the way, we were never a polling organization. We were just running a social experiment on X to see if we could create something, and then we're shutting down." And like, wow, we actually had some truth in the polling industry. Like, because famously Rush Limbaugh always said the polls aren't there to reflect public opinion instead of shape public opinion. And so that's what they were doing. And then,
Yeah.
they
I mean,
outed themselves and moved on. But the important thing is when I went in, I'm going to throw this back at you in a second to say, look, the reality is that the parties, the campaigns do real internal polling. They need to know. They have to have good information, not the information that we see out in the world. So their internal polling is going to tell us what their strategy is by the talking points they throw out into the world. And that's the way politics has to be interpreted on a regular basis. And that's what I know that's what some of what you and I do when we talk about these things. I know it's very important to you. So just, throw some more color on that if you want.
yeah,
'Cause
yeah. No,
it is an important.
I mean, my point. So two things, like the trying to glom onto Angie Nixon as being a DSA victory, as if the DSA ran Angie Nixon, participated in her campaign, spoke
Mhm,
to the voters, got their message across, and were rewarded with votes. It's totally false. Just didn't
mhm.
happen. And
Right.
the DSA in Florida has said as much. And anyone who knows Angie Nixon, like in Florida, just knows, like, she is, she's beat many people in Jacksonville in the Democratic Party. She knows how to win elections. She's helped win elections for her, when she worked for Mia. And she's just smart. She's a good Paul, man. And like, she's kind of that best of breed Florida politician type, you know. Um,
Scenario. Yeah, yeah.
and the DSA story that's right now being trying to told nationally is really just a giant. It's not a retcon as much as it's a misdirection against how bad the shape of the Democratic Party really is coming into the election. They're trying to spook the Republicans, which is dumb because honestly, they're just going to provoke latent turnout that wouldn't have been coming out in a midterm, but whatever.
Mhm.
They think that creating this sort of like dominant Hassan Piker's going to come kill you with, you know, his, cologne wearing army or whatever. Um, oh, the socialists are going to take over America. And it's like, okay, because we won like some really shitty Democratic districts that, were like 80-20 districts. And then we figured out how to poison the ranked choice or other, you know, gameable, and then we promised all the stupid people in the district, free gumdrops for life, oh, and we won the seat. So, well, congratulations,
Congratulations. Yeah.
like America's two steps away from 1917. Like, fuck off. Um,
We
so
wish that the libertarians were that organized that they could actually promise people free gumdrops and actually win an election. Oh, by the way, just,
yeah, well, that's
that's a
never going
whole
to
nother
happen.
story.
But
But
I mean, the thing is Donald has to start courting these NPAs, and if he
mhm,
doesn't do it, he's playing with fire. And I would point out in 2018 when DeSantis won, right, and he won over Gillum by a hair, but weirdly, and like I said, we have three elected. Four really I mean, other than governor, we have the lieutenant governor, but Nikki Fried won an open seat for agriculture commissioner against a guy named Matt Caldwell, who, and like I said, it's an open seat. So she won by, like, Caldwell at one point was up by 40,000 votes, and then it turned on Broward County. And eventually Nikki Fried won by 6,000 votes, and there was a lot of sus on a recount, right?
mhm.
And so there was a lot of sus stuff going on in Broward, and this led to Brenda Snipes, the former supervisor of elections in Broward County, to have to resign. But Brenda Snipes did not disappear 40,000 votes. She might have made appear about six, and then a judge who was a Democrat, like, appealed for reason, and you know basically swept the whole investigation under. And it was only later that she was kind of forced. And Brenda Snipes had so many vectors of incompetence that, accusations of malfeasance were just like gravy on top of the giant steak of idiocy that she was. So
Right.
she was out anyway. But a lot of people thought that election was stolen. I happen to not think that it was close enough that it's a good lesson to remember that weird candidates and I don't know what it was about Caldwell, but he was soft in places he should not have been soft, where the Democrats had no chance of manufacturing votes. And I think it's one of the things is, ag commissioners just kind of like, who gives a shit, right?
Right.
And but Donald should remember like how close Nikki Fried won when DeSantis won his first term. Um, and split tickets can happen even in situations where you don't think they're possible. So he better start, he's such a good brown noser for Trump. He has the skill set. So my message to the Donalds campaign is start kissing the ass of every NPA in Florida and get down on your knees and apologize for refusing to let us have debates. If you don't
Mm,
do that, you got a real risk of, not winning.
mm.
And here's a prediction. I do not think the numbers for Moody and Donalds, if Donalds wins, will be even remotely the same.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Like Moody could get 60% of the vote and Donalds could get like 52% of the vote.
Right. Yeah. Well, now one of the other things, and not just that about Byron Donalds. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Because I've had people
Oh,
ask
one
me.
one last Florida fact.
Sure.
Fishback coming in at 10.5% is respectable, but the really interesting thing about about Fishback were the crosstabs for under 35, and not just on the 30 votes on college campuses. His under 35 performance was really good. Fishback has a lot of problems. Just personally, he had they did a lot of good oppo on him, and some of it might be true. So, but what he represents is the story.
Right.
Fishback represents, and this is a good segue for the national questions. The level of rightward movement that is happening in males under 35, let's say, is palpable and real. Like it's
Hmm.
profound. And I would argue it's more principles based than the corresponding leftward shift in women. I think, to be blunt, women's political orientation is more pliable than men's over
Right.
their lifetime. And
Hmm.
some number of young women are going to get married no matter how bad you think the situations are. And as they do that, their politics will centralize and occasionally move all the way to the right. So, um, I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting observation that in
It
this
isn't
election,
it is and it's something that's going to have to be managed. So one of the things that I've been considering and I've heard from different people about, which is that in some ways and you can argue this all you want and it's fine. It's the Susie Wiles question, which is that if the midterms are really about boomers and the boomer turnout at the at the end of the day, you got to turn out the votes you can turn out, right? If she's the if that's what she's best at turning out, and this is the last election she has to be involved in to get us through this situation, I think that's maybe the only argument you could make as to why she's still there. Um, and that your observation that she should be removed after the midterms is, I think, the
well, you're
and so
never going
I'm
to get
just
me to ascribe competence to her, and I don't. I think two things. One, Trump has a management style that is kind of weirdly familial. He likes people who remind him of his hot daughter or his mother, like, and he's not a good judge of competence. Like, this is why he loves firing people so much, is because he pathologically hires people who don't have skills,
mm,
and they need to be fired. And it's a weird, never ending thing. And I'm talking about The Apprentice. I'm talking about his companies. I'm talking about his first administration. Um, and and just even like, let's get serious. Like, he appointed half his appointments, like Pirro and Hegseth, are like picked right off of Fox News.
right.
It's fucked up. It's like it's not your best move.
Hmm.
Um, and thankfully he was imprinted by Wall Streeters in New York, which is how we got Besant, thank God.
Hmm.
But we got Lutnick too. So and Lutnick is probably part of that exact same stupid like Trump sorting process. He's like, oh, we ran Goldman Sachs, so I need a really smart Jew. It's like,
Right.
that's the Trumpian analytical framework, and I don't know. I'm not a fan of Lutnick.
Me
Uh,
either. No, me either. And I think
I
it's
mean,
very, I think it's,
I thank God that he's not Sec Treasury.
yeah.
But he's still, a malign influence, I think, in the government at Commerce. Um,
It's the point I was just the simple
I'm
point I was trying to make is that, in some ways, if Wiles is good at one thing, it's ensuring that, she turns out the boomers, and because she understands that that part of the
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I don't think
right.
that's her role at all. I think her
Okay.
role is she's a gatekeeper, she's a matriarch figure to Trump. He trusts her for whatever reason,
Mhm.
and because he's got a blind spot on, you know, all he'd have to do is think for 2 seconds of like what part of the Florida GOP. Now, granted, Trump likes being brown nosed,
Mhm.
so maybe he doesn't even care because to him is like whatever. I got my airport and I'll retire in Palm Beach. Fuck you. Okay, but you know, Susie Wiles is a conniver. She's not. I wouldn't attribute vote success to her. She was a good campaign manager for him, but I don't think it's in the sense of being a Paul as much as she has a lot of good contacts. And so I think she was able to, you know, open the phone book and get a lot of competent, just like street level campaign people. She has that for sure. She has the
So that's
black book.
and that's maybe what
But
I
but
was
but
getting
that's
at here.
different than being someone who you're saying she's driving the boomer vote. I don't think Susie Wiles can read a spreadsheet, let alone do like a cross-tab analysis by zip code and tell you where you should put money in a race.
Right.
Sorry, I don't.
Okay.
That's not her.
That's fair. And I'm just saying that ultimately, this is the last time she has to be relevant, which is the only reason she's still in the administration. And we have enough.
I'm worried that you're wrong about that. In that I think
I know.
her relevance is from some other vector, and if she rides this out, she insulates Trump from really important feedback from people.
Hmm.
And I would ascribe a lot of what's going wrong in this administration to her gatekeeping. And I also don't think she's loyal to him, which is, I think, the most important part.
Oh, I agree.
I think she is no better than Reince Priebus.
Hmm.
I think she's been playing Trump the entire time for the benefit of the neocon never Trumpers who now, thanks to the war in Iran, have all pretended that they love Trump again, and it's got him very, I think, disoriented in reality. And there's a serious risk in this midterms at the national level. I've obviously said my piece on Florida, but
Right.
you know, the real danger for Trump is softness. It's not like at the national level, no one's going to come out and vote Democrat in their district to spite Trump not giving them everything they wanted.
Right.
But a ton of NPAs are going to stay home. A ton of never voteds who voted for Trump 3 times are going to stay home. He
Hmm.
will not rally them. And in fact, the DSA people are doing the best job that can be done to rally Republican turnout
Hmm.
with this,
Right.
socialist boogeyman trip they're on.
No. Okay. Then that leads to an interesting question as to who's actually, behind that push. And I know there's a lot of chatter about that potentially being, you know, driven either by Trump or Trump aligned figures such as
Or
Biden.
some star chamber of pure politico, you know,
Right.
realpolitikers. Sure. I don't
Yeah.
think look, I wouldn't be surprised if Susie Wiles picked up the phone in Ponte Vedra and said, we need to make sure Angie has enough money in her pot to first of all, anybody who knows Florida politics knew Angie was going to kick Vindman's ass, but not by
Mhm.
this much. And
Right.
she had 1/16 the money Vindman had.
Hmm.
Um,
The
but
the the lovely part about the Vindman thing is that they raised an extra $15 million for him for the election for the general election, which Nixon can't use. So it's like that money is just lost. Like where does it go? Because
It'll go,
Vindman.
won't that just go to the national DNC? They're broke anyway. So 15, that's like,
I'm not sure. It was raised for Alexander Vindman for Senate.
then it has to go back
Right,
unless he's going to
exactly.
run it, unless he's going to run again in 2 years
Again in
for,
2 years or 4 years
because
or whatever.
The Florida seat cadence changed because Rubio um would have Rubio's this wouldn't have been Rubio's reelection year, even though it's
Right.
Rubio's seat, because um but Scott's seat is up, and
Hmm.
I don't even know if Scott's going to run again because he's pretty old.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Vindman could hold the money for 2 years and then file to run in the primary. It would be a good way to siphon the money off to a bunch of
Hmm.
friends, put them all on payroll for two
Yep.
years to like read, you know,
The retwitter,
but basically.
Yeah, that was a retwitter and and pump his tires. Yeah, so moving up to the national level like this is the interesting part about it. Again, the reason I was bringing up the Susie Wild boomer angle was because you brought up the Fishback under 35 angle, right? I was trying to tie those two together in a certain way to say, look, you've got this impulse in American political demographics ending and another one beginning. And this is a very fundamental shift, which is, you and I've talked about it. I've talked about it for years that, this whole, the old, um, divides within American politics on foreign policy are shifting. Clearly, what I'm talking about here is Israel, right? And that as the generations age out, the support for Israel is going to be lesser, is going to continue to drop off. Therefore, in a certain sense, that's why we're having this conversation today about, this push to shore up for the Israelis to shore up whatever they can get out of us. And I've been watching all of that stuff from that perspective for a long time. And this may wind up being accelerated into 2028 and not wait until 2030 or 2032 or something like that. It's going to happen. It could happen easily in the next 2 years at the 2028 election cycle. And we may get some clues to that fact or that trend in the 2026 midterm results, meaning when you dig into the results, like you did with Fishback versus Donald, you may see more of this. And I know that that's been a theme that's been banged on by certain pollsters and certain parts of the quote unquote MAGA or dissident MAGA commentariat. I won't name names here, but we all know who I'm talking about. And like to me, that's always felt like um, it's always felt like a narrative that's way too immature. It's way too forward thinking. That this is about 2026. We're trying to win the midterms now. We're not worried about 2028 or 2030. You guys are talking about 2028, 2030 issues.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at here.
So it's going to pain me to say this. So let me first say something is I have an Excel somewhere with an actuarial table that tells me, like, based on a today lookup, what percentage of the boomers have died already. So that's who I am as an Xer. Um, but it pains me to say that the irrelevance of the boomers is extremely premature.
Mhm.
So, yes, we are passing out of their super dominance, but they are going to be a pretty big part of our electorate for many years to come. There's a lot of boomers who were born in the late 50s.
Mhm.
They're not going to be dead tomorrow.
I like to use the phrase spiritual boomerism. There's a lot of boomers spiritually in Gen X. Like there's a this we're not, you know, these generational divides are not cut and dried. These aren't like once the once Gen X is in charge demographically, it's going to be this. It's not that at all. So we have
No, I
a
mean,
real.
and going back to your point on Israel too, like at
Mhm.
some point, if you take it as a function of age, I think it's correlation without causation. I think the
Mhm.
shift away from Israel is much more just has discrete basis in
Mhm.
people who, just look at what happened post 10/7 and they're like, this is you know, the destruction of Gaza to the extent like they just don't think it was proportional, and
Hmm.
they then take that on top of both the original bombing of the nuclear stuff and obviously the Iran war or whatever we're calling it. They just view this as, you know, America acting in Israel's interest to the exclusion of America's interests.
Hmm.
And whether that's, arguable or not as true isn't the point. What the point is in politics, what matters is what people believe.
Right.
And the there's a lot of the further down you go on the age band, there's just more and more, I think, differences there on both belief but also just on reaction to current events. So
I've noted though, I mean, I've been saying this for 10 years, like since we started Gold Glutes and Guns or 9 years ago, like I could see the shift happening. Like I knew I knew what our generation was feeling then. And this is before Israel became, it was even an issue. And then the kids underneath it. And this is something you and I have been talking about this. So everything that's happened post 10/7 with Gaza and Iran and everything else is just accelerating that process. Right. And so my argument is that as opposed to this coming out in the demographic wash or whatever, in the 2030s, these events have pulled that up into this time frame. I just don't know that it's going to be operative for
yeah.
this particular election cycle. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, and I also think, as fatuous and hysterical as everybody loves to be about Israel, it's, the period with which boomer Israel imprinting happened was also just part of the great, post Reagan and post Reagan like military industrial buildup. Israel benefited from being like the dog at the table, getting a lot of really nice scraps. Like,
Hmm.
the master is eating nothing but ribeyes and like whole sides of cow. And like, so Israel kind of came up with us in
Hmm.
getting, and that changed their behavior, right? Like,
Hmm.
if they weren't flying F-16s, most of what they're hated for doing wouldn't have even been possible. And people don't spend enough time thinking about it like that, like a supply push,
Hmm.
technology push, like, because obviously Israel acts in the interests of the US a hell of a lot. And
Hmm.
and this is one of the things I find to be just so annoying about this sort of Israel is got us on a leash thing that everybody on the right seems to be incapable of thinking around. It's like you don't, you don't understand that, we get a lot out of using them too. Oh,
Hmm.
no, no, no. And it's like, okay, like, and
Yeah,
it's this one-dimensional stuff. It's, but it's Twitter world, you can't really
I know.
spend all your time there or, you will go insane.
Hmm. No, you're correct. This is one of the things that, has come up in this discussion about, the Section 230 of the Section 230, 270 of the NDAA, the Israeli and the American,
Well,
war
people
machine is,
people people won't even read, the bill. You could just read
I
the
know,
bill. The
I
language
know,
is published. It's on the Senate.gov site. You could just go read it, and you'll
I know.
notice, wow, there's no language that says the
We're
Israelis are going to have
merging our
command
militaries.
over. It's
And I've,
n-
I've read it and I looked at it and I went and it became obvious in some ways. And again, I was arguing with a little bit with Steve Murray on Twitter about this very thing the other day. And I said, he started bringing up, well, this should have been a treaty and not legislation. I'm like, and that's why people were crashing out. I'm like, no, it's not, Steve. Like, no, you're the first person to mention that this should have been treaty level stuff
it's
versus,
not it that doesn't even make sense because
I know.
think of all the, the hoops we're making the Turks jump through to maybe give them the F-35, but probably not. Why are we doing that? Well, they violated previous agreements. They're in NATO. We did all
Hmm.
this security stuff, and then they decided to go buy an S-400. And what we know is that the S-400 is going to be mapping flight data from U.S. planes, F-16s, and in the future F-35s. And we said,
Right.
screw you, buddy. And
Yeah.
that was all done with just partner analysis.
Right.
And you can make an argument that Israel's, sold our stuff to China, so we should never, and I would make that argument that we should
Sure.
never give them the cutting edge stuff again. But they have good lobbyists. Hate to break it to you. So if you want to fight that fight, you fight it where it makes sense, which is to, call Israel out for technology sharing with China as it being like, look, you need to stop doing this. You need to make this impossible, or you are out of the first realm, of tech for us. Now,
Exactly.
that is an entirely different matter.
Hmm.
Um, but it should probably be brought up from time to time.
It would
Um,
be, I would be nice if it would be nice if we were having that part of the conversation as opposed to the insanity. And
But
this
the
is
big
what, and
picture
it,
is, the Democratic Party is already been bought and purchased by the CCP. So this is
Mhm,
one of the reasons why that particular behavior cannot be like the Republicans are beholden to the actual MIC companies, and the
mhm,
Democrats are beholden to the actors in this play.
mhm. Right, right, right.
And we as Americans are, of course, left behind while they continue to build up, now a surveillance state with military technology. Like we're way beyond uh, worrying about MRAPs that these fat SWAT team guys can't even drive.
Hmm. Right. All right. Well, so again, this is it's like this is the part of the electoral mapping problem, right? Is like we have listened to these people like go off the deep end about these issues in ways that make no sense relative to the situation as it pertains as it is at hand. And it it's what always begs my questions is like who's helping drive that bus? And it's not just, obviously the Democrats wanting to win elections or working with the Chinese. It's a deeper and wider problem than this. Everybody is trying to, and as always, I keep going back to the day after Trump got shot, they were out there trying to tell us that he uh he staged the whole freaking thing. And that story won't die. Like, how about you were trying to blow up his electoral coalition to ensure that the United States doesn't extricate itself from the mess that he was handed when he took office in 2025. And this, in fact, this brings me to Scott Besson and why Besson has taken center stage uh, for this administration at this point in time is actually quite interesting because it's clear now that what Besson, I think he's doing, is he's beginning to highlight what the real part, what the real story about Iran actually was. It was all about all the things that you and I have been talking about, and I've been writing about, and I've been screaming into a microphone about for 5 months. Which is this is about remapping the world trade flow and and deprecating single points of failure and choke points at both geographic and trade based and production based around the world. And that was the status quo ante, and
Yeah.
Iran is the flashpoint to reorganize all that stuff.
Yeah. And it's reconstructing the former colonial control over those choke points that the British had without having to reconstruct their actual colonial empire.
Hmm.
Now people could argue, well, that's what the dollar is for, but it's also a different world. Like we it's a very, the actual speed of communications and of actual ships. It is a different world. But first thing Trump did when he got in office was address the Panama Canal,
Hmm.
address Venezuela, address
Hmm.
drug smuggling, not, qua drugs, but qua preventing there being whole routes unchallenged to bring men, materiel, and contraband of unknown type, meaning drone technology, into our country. That
Hmm.
was what the war against the cartels first has to be a war against any, we gave the CIA Bitcoin, so they should be able to uh, not have to sell drugs to do their mischief. They should be able to
Hmm.
just, take seized crypto and pay people with that. Um, but if you stop all drug transport from South America, you'll have some CIA feathers ruffled. Good,
Right.
ruffle them. But the real war against the cartels is about the fact that Chinese, agents have a complete vector to bring anything they want into this country. And, man pads, whatever. And we can't have that. And we need to have a control over our borders. That's the other thing about the open borders Again, is it about immigration? Sure, but it's also about being a grown-up country who has some degree of, systemic control over our map. And
Right.
because otherwise we're just setting ourselves up for sabotage at a degree that I don't think anybody really understands.
Right.
Um, you can bring in the warheads of a missile that, you know, you could, if you can smuggle in a truck, you can smuggle in very dangerous things. And I'm not even really saying new, I'm not really doing a true romance or a true lies. What was the
Yeah, it was true. It
nukes?
was true
True
lies. Yeah.
lies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'm not talking about smuggling nuclear warheads. I'm just saying the amount of material. And I would be most worried about drone attacks on, for instance, B2 bases. If those
Mhm.
drones, like what the Ukrainians did, sneak the drones close to the base, hit the base.
Yeah, no, I mean these are all things that needed to be done. So you keep going through systemically what Trump did in his administration. It's all of these things. And again, it goes back to shutting down USAID and all the. It wasn't just one or two vectors. It wasn't just the physical choke points of the Panama Canal, Venezuela, right? Potentially, we're trying to work some deal out to figure out how to deal with Cuba. Which is another interesting story.
Well, we
Obviously.
have a lot of traders. Some
Hmm.
were there was two major problems. One, the traders were in the government,
Yep.
and the other main, possibly bigger problem were the traders were the beneficiaries of unchecked financing from the government.
Hmm.
And shutting down USAID, the most interesting thing about it is it's changed the nature of the Billboard 100.
Yep. Yeah.
How bizarre is that? And the more you know about things like, Jackson Pollock and the CIA's, movements in art, and you
Hmm.
think it's all history because it was directed against the Soviets, but controlling the masses with music, I mean, wow.
Bad
You
music.
know, well,
Yeah.
it's just and also the personalities in behind the music. It's almost more like the Mickey Mouse Club. Like
Hmm.
it's more important to pick the mouthpieces regardless of the art.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and we this is a much bigger conversation.
Yeah, no,
This in
this is a
itself is
dedicated podcast and or book.
yeah,
Um,
podcast series, you name it.
but
Like we can go into this
yeah,
for
I just
minutes.
don't think the CIA is like doing the Frankie Goes to Hollywood research on psychoacoustics. I think they just want to have their hand in the puppet's ass, and
Right,
that's why they, make the puppet.
right,
You get to pick what the puppet says. That's all. I
right.
don't think it goes deeper than that. There's no
Yeah,
it'd be a waste of energy.
right,
But
right,
back
right.
to like choke point theory for one, I'll just say the one thing I didn't say is all of the stuff that Trump did, including the Straits of Malacca and re-engaging with the Philippines and engaging in a new way with Indonesia. So all these
Hmm.
things are binding now in China, and
Hmm.
China's ability to force project blue water projection, which is a bit exaggerated, even though they have three carriers now. Um, we get all this stuff done, and then also the ham-fisted Greenland rhetoric, whatever that was. I don't know to take it seriously or not as much as getting the subject on the table. The problem
Hmm.
with what happens with Iran, which is obviously about continuing this to the Strait of Hormuz, um, is that, it was always going to be way harder than Venezuela.
Of course.
And I honestly would have liked them to address Cuba in its totality
Hmm.
and win the Western Hemisphere before they did something like they did. Because the first day it started, I was like, well, this is either going to make Trump look like a genius or it's going to be a problematic mess. And I'm not, I don't. I'm not one of these people who is whining about, oh, he lied to me about no new wars. Like, no, I want the US to do the things Trump has been doing to obviate the need for a new world war. There comes a
Right,
point where you have to bomb some stuff to adjust the status quo to your favor. This is the thing isolationists never understand. Even as they rightly point out the corruption that comes
Hmm.
from surrendering to the military-industrial complex. They're not wrong, but the totality of the worldview, the libertarian, non-interventionist, Tuckerite, whatever you want to call it, it's wrong because you either understand that you live in a world where others will act on the vacuum you refuse to close, or you don't.
Right.
And you also can simultaneously say, look, I'm enough of a student of history to see how dangerous it is to to go out and try to change these things because of the reactions, because of the MIC becoming getting too much in the driver's seat.
Hmm.
That though isn't an argument about why you should never do it.
Hmm.
Like most things that are hard, they're hard.
They're hard.
and and simplification through a bunch of unread people in the media arguing totally cartoon versions of the arguments against each other as a form of like limbic catharsis every day. It's like, dude, can you just go like watch football and just stop?
It would be, yeah, I would,
Just get off
yeah,
Twitter,
please.
man. You guys suck at this and you don't even
Yeah,
know you're arguing with computers who have
right,
infinite patience.
right. Yeah, no, and that's where I'm like, I've been, the longer Iran goes on, it's been funny to me. I've had to, I spent a lot of time, I spent a lot of time trying to analyze the, uh, the order of operations and what's happened. These events have happened in this order. These things have happened, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and from the beginning, I'm like, well, he's clearly making this move. This provoked that move. Lloyd's of London, the Straits, all the bombing, all this. I'm like, there's a bigger strategy here than we can see. We should be engaged in that, and we should also reject anybody saying, "Oh, he went in half cock without a plan." Like you don't put three carrier strike groups in place without a plan because that's a massive military logistical lift. So this was clearly planned. Then if you go back and you start really looking at the shift in the narrative that we were and the shift in tone from a lot of people who were connected to this, it's all started last summer. And there's a bit of a continuum in terms of all of that when you go and you back and fill and you're going, oh, they knew he was going into Iran at some point in 2026. And they started because all of the plans had to have been put on the table and started organizing in 2025. And as you said earlier, there are traitors in the administration. There are traitors in our government. There's traitors in the military. There's traitors everywhere. That information is going to leak out. It's going to move. It's going to move around the
Well,
world.
the,
Worst
the
kept
key the
secret in
key
the
thing
world.
here is that the so to me, when someone says half cocked, they're basically trying to complete a character sketch of Donald Trump, which is
Right.
that he is so erratic that he doesn't know what he's going to do tomorrow. And then someone comes and whispers something in his ear, and all of a sudden he's like, let's invade Greenland.
Right.
And that is, just the basic, whatever you want to call the Cindy Sheehan's of today. Like that's the basic dog food for the pussy hat left.
Hmm.
Um, and
And libertarian right.
Yeah, but true, true. And so that's like an evergreen at this point on Twitter and Facebook and MS now. It is just the chosen caricature. I think that the performance in Iran is worth critiquing, and I just don't think half-cocked is part of an accurate critique. The critique is ill-advised at the moment in time they took it, and overly ambitious beyond the resources we were willing to commit to ensure success. And anyone who told, and by ill-advised, I mean I do think Trump was told that this was going to be harder than Venezuela, but still achievable with
Mm.
what more or less would be a shock and awe component, meaning go in there, bomb the shit out of them, they will fold. Now, there had to have been people in the room who said, this is a dangerous assumption.
Hmm.
This is not does not match our intelligence on how the IRGC has set up regional control that fully contemplated decapitation as its actual design principle. So when your
Hmm.
enemy has a strategy that they say, we think that our enemy, meaning us, will take out our leadership, and we have a whole devolved infrastructure of fighting back, and you have the intelligence on that, you better address that too. You don't, because otherwise, if you're just like, oh, well, that they'll just fuck it up. It's like, well, they did plan for it. You should know this.
Hmm.
And maybe you just think, well, we're the hyperpower. It doesn't matter if they plan for it. But that's not the vibe I got from the balance of early, Hegseth and Kane and everyone reporting. I get the vibe that they thought, the shock and awe slash hyperkinetic first couple of waves. And I don't mean like, I mean over weeks and months, but like
Right.
still the idea that we could degrade them to the point of complete surrender. I do think that people thought where we are was the 10% case. And I think plenty of people could have argued that it was the 60% case.
Mm.
That's what I think the valid framework of criticism. And ultimately Trump can no president, not just Trump, but no president can seriously drill down and do the tactical and strategic analysis. This is the job of the military and
Hmm.
DIA and CIA and everyone else.
Yep. And
And the last one is you also need to be very aware that when you integrate foreign intelligence, be it from, Mossad or the other Israeli or MI6 or,
mm,
whoever you trust, you better have a secondary means of confirmation, or in a balanced Scarcord manner, you better put a point 0.7 at the stuff you multiply everything they tell you by a discount factor
hmm
before you take it as doctrine. Now, the Israelis knew where people were. They had good intel on that. But
hmm
what other intel did they have that led to actions being taken? So,
yeah, no, these are that see, that's fair, right? Um, and then when what I'll not counter, but what I'll add to that is there's clearly an immediate extension of what we were doing to Venezuela, to the cartels, to the Democrats, to the traders within the domestic traders, um, at the economic level and at the financial level, that we then set that in motion as well. And that had massive ripple effects around the world. And the problem with that is that gets into telling a story that's incredibly complex, that does not reduce to simple sound bites. Hell, it doesn't even reduce to simple, narratives within a single or podcast, right? There's a lot to unpack there. And some of it, as always, since you don't have all the information, and sometimes since you can't even see the net effect in the long term, what the strategy is going to be until it unfolds, and then you watch everybody's reaction to it. Now I'm specifically talking about places like the European Union, the Bank of England, now the stuff with the yen carry trade. Like when until unless you were in the strategy room, you don't know what you can't see it until it's in front of your face. At least I couldn't. But I could see some of it, right? So I could see would why would Lloyd's of London do what it did? Why did Iran do what it did? Why did everybody push the narrative in the way what the
yeah,
sum and substance of their propaganda, the TLDR and their propaganda, not what their propaganda was, but what it meant.
right.
You know what I mean? Like that's
Whether it's a legally declared war or not, it's an armed conflict. So the
right,
belligerents have no incentive to release any accurate information because it becomes targeting information for the other side.
right.
Um, then we have a very different media than the CNN in Iraq war era
Hmm.
that we all have a lot of
Right.
muscle memory on. We don't have that anymore. And now most of us are getting clips off of X that if you understand what video game footage looks like, you're like, oh, okay. But a lot of
Right.
people are getting fooled by Arma or whatever footage and or just recycled footage from another war. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like wars are I mean, stuff's blowing up around you. Being a great cameraman's not your first concern. Most actual
Right.
war footage is pretty jittery and it's pretty dusty and it's pretty like, oh my God.
Right.
So it actually works real well to recycle because it's hard to look at those details and be like, oh, that's absolutely that
Right.
place in downtown Tehran. It's like, no, it's a building blowing up. And so you have that level of just malicious misinformation, and then you have
Mm.
honest, just miscalculation based on, you know, reporters of all stripes they need a story that at some point you have to just decide to make a call with your available information.
Sure.
And some of that information is bad, some of it is malign, and some of it you're just wrong on. Some
Hmm.
like people make errors with when people don't have enough time to analyze what they're looking at, just there's errors. And
Right.
that's not malice. That's just like,
That's
oh,
not
I
malice.
fucked that up.
Yeah.
And we also have, just way too many people don't appreciate how many synthetic actors there are in the information space, i.e. bots. And when I
Hmm.
say bots, I mean a technology, not a person who's, an NPC. That's a
Hmm.
different layer of problem, but uh and it's also a real problem that's coming from, there are absolute human beings typing for Iran, typing for China, typing for North Korea, but more problematically, there's also automation. Um,
Hmm.
and people just don't
Yeah.
appreciate how much of what they think they're reacting to. And this is where the anti-data center stuff has been very interesting to watch because
Mm.
almost everybody, there's the inkling of awakening on this issue that people are starting to realize that, like the anti-Pershing missile, from the 80s stuff, and the
Mm.
anti-nuclear energy stuff, from the entirety, like we are starting to realize, I think, instinctually that, oh, we have adversaries who would want us to not do this. And maybe some of this is bullshit. And I happen to be, you know, I'm against malinvestment, and I like to point it out, which is, a lot of what we talked about on our last podcast.
Hmm.
Or maybe it was when the two of us were on with Ben Keller and we talked about data centers.
Right.
Regardless,
But it was the Caloran podcast, actually.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, yeah. We were talking about kind of the Enron level of,
Hmm.
but we have like, I don't know, we have 8,000, 35,000, however you want to count like what a CDN is. We have plenty of buildings with racks of computers in it, you know. Um, AI is not going to need to tear down, all of our forests. I mean, it's just malinvestment, and I think
Right.
we need to be against that. But the NIMBY stuff and just believing you're not going to have water or power in your state. And even in the Florida race, it became, now all these stupid governors are coming out, calling for AI moratoriums. I mean, it's I'm not putting my stake down either side of the argument, except on a case by case basis. And I think people need to start being comfortable saying, look, you can't make a generalization about AI data centers or hyperscalers. You need to
Right.
start looking at every project and go,
Yep.
did they bring the power? Okay. Are they too close to residential? Is there a realistic, like all the stuff that we've always done? Like you know, you can't put,
Again,
zoning
politics are local.
exists, dude.
Right.
Like,
Politics are local. Nuance matters. Like details matter. As you always say, facts matter.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
Well,
it's you know,
simplifying everything to just these giant categories is that is the domain and the realm of information operations.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
Because
no, yeah, no, that's where we are right now. And I think that's the thing. It's the interesting part about what I see is happening as we come into the news. I'm going to try to round this up and bring this
yeah,
home, right? Which is that we're I don't know, 2.5 months from the midterms, and I'm watching what looks like a whole bunch of really tired old narratives not having a lot of 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 impact or import. I was expecting riots all summer. I was expecting something horrible. I got none of that so far. And what I have is a bunch of, it looks like a bunch of has-beens like going through the motions of hoping that they can affect what's the outcomes in 20 in November. And that's weird.
yeah.
Okay. So and
Well, there's
again,
something lurking in the zeitgeist,
there
which is,
is there
I
is.
think, a realization of the futility of narrative at some point.
Hmm.
I don't think most people
Hmm.
are kind of woke yet on this issue, but I think a lot of people realize that there is breakthrough, like the bots, the realization of manipulation being real and not just an accusation thrown at
Hmm.
someone. It's starting to percolate. And the other thing is, the freedom of speech is a sacred right in America. But the problem is over time it became the obligation to speak on every subject. And people realize it's just not practical. You have the freedom to shut the fuck up when you don't know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
It's a freedom that most people don't elect to take often enough. And
Yeah, no, present
and I
company
think,
included. No, I mean, I get it. Yeah, no, you're right.
yeah, no. And I think, but part of it is people have realized how unsatisfying it is. And the beauty of AI is that it's made it literally impossible. Like being a pedantic asshole because you sneak out with your phone and look something up in the bathroom at a party. Okay, that's very, 2007 of you. But now you can't compete with the AI analysis. Whether it's right or wrong is immaterial. It's
Right.
the speed of everything has now overwhelmed human response times. And I think part of
Mhm.
that is making people realize, you know what? I know what I know. I'm going to argue that, and everything else, I don't give a shit. And I hope that happens quickly. Now, at the same time, you're seeing AI hysterias like this, all these women protesting in favor of this child killer. You're seeing hysterias happen too.
Right.
And those will continue to happen.
Mhm.
Carmelo Anthony's case was not driven by facts of the case, it was driven by these sort of
Yep.
meta analyses of the case. And I
Yep.
think the most, and these can be real and not real. Like one last thing I want to say about the election is Louisiana versus Calais, which the case that the Supreme Court ruled against the gerrymandering, which has now led to the redistricting. The Angie Nixon capitalized on that case and driving black turnout to levels that are very out of norm for a midterm primary.
Hmm.
Look for that to be a frequent feature in the South where there's large black populations. So it won't matter as much on district level races because obviously districts are small, but on state level races, including federal ones, where what matters is the total vote count in the bucket, histrionics around. I happen to think Louisiana versus Calais is a very sensible decision, but it is very easy to demagogue as, you know, taking away black people's right to vote. That
Hmm.
demagoguery is going to be turned up to infinity
Hmm.
and it will work. So expect black turnout to be high, which means Republicans better be prepared even to lose some of these gerrymandered new, non-gerrymandered new seats,
Hmm.
where they made 53% Republican districts thinking
Hmm.
that's enough. I'd be like, don't bet on it, man.
Hmm.
I can tell you a few districts in Florida that everyone are presuming are going to go red. There's a couple of them where I'm like, I don't know. I would not be
Right.
surprised to see that one go to the Democrat purely on this. And so hysterias that are capitalized on are a meaningful part of our politics. I think they're too much a part of our culture. I hope they are not here to stay as the most frequent thing we have to deal with downstream of the AI revolution. But um, yeah, got my eye on it. That's for sure.
Okay. That's all I can really. I think that's a good place to end, knowing that um we have there's a lot going on, and there's a lot for us to consider the nuances of these races going forward. I think this is going to be a very I it's going to be funny, but we're going to I know there's a podcast in our future where we go through the results from the 2026 midterms, however they turn out, to tease out some of these things. And I guess, part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast today was to remind everybody that, this is the kind of analysis you kind of have to do if you want to, get a sense of where things may or may not be going. And it's important to to remind everybody, yeah, no, really, all politics are local. And what matters is um the 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 makeup of those particular areas, and that none of these places that you hear about, Iran, London, Iran, England, Florida, blah blah. These places aren't monoliths. Like there's real nuance and real
Well,
geographic
in,
and
in a world of imperfect information, there is no shame in your answer to a political question being a considered, evaluated, I don't fucking know. That's a perfectly valid answer.
yes,
And
it
more
is.
people should consider, it's not, people can make fun of you and say, "Oh,
Right.
well, you don't know anything." It's like, well, but I know I don't have a conclusion
Hmm.
because I know that the balance of what's available doesn't lead me to one, which is different than not knowing anything.
And
Uh,
and
but it's
being
also
able
better. It's also better than picking a solution based on, frankly, obvious manipulation and automation and emotion.
moreover, doing it, even when we could sit here and do we could do a 90-minute podcast about the things we don't know, but teasing out of what we don't know will also highlight for the audience the things other people don't know who say they know. And that is a important part of the communications process as well. So with that said, Dexter White, thank you for the chat today. This has been great. It's been fun as always. And
Yep. Thanks, Sam.
let's do the thing. So I'm TFL 1728 on X. He is Dexter K. White. We are Gold Goats and Guns, and sign up on Patreon at Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns, and we'll do the thing. We'll talk soon, and
And a shout out to all of our newsletter subscribers and other
of course,
subscribers. We appreciate you, and we're the only reason we can sit here and do this, at least in a way that anyone would listen. Otherwise, we would just be doing it when nobody would be listening.
and we'll be doing it the way we used to do it. All right, you take care, man. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.